Hello and welcome to the NevilleResearch.com video. Today we are going to look at one of the most exciting discoveries ever made relating to Henry Neville. In 1591, Thomas Saville received a series of newsletters from Europe. The newsletters were written in Italian and had updates on military campaigns and political goings-on in Europe. He forwarded these letters to Henry Neville, and these letters were passed on through his descendants and are now held at the National Archives. On the back of one of these letters, Henry Neville has scribbled some very, very interesting things. Now, we know it's Henry Neville's handwriting because it's an absolute match for the italic handwriting in his other letters, and especially the way he signed his name throughout his life. On top of that, the name Harry Killigrew is written several times, and that is the name of his father-in-law and Neville's father. So this is undoubtedly Henry Neville's handwriting, and what's really exciting is the content of it. So the first thing we want to look at is this Alabec, that's an ampersand, rustico, and then once again, Alabec, and rustico. So what is this a reference to? In Boccaccio's Decameron, there is a story about a young woman named Alabec and rustico. And rustico seduces Alabec, and the seduction is described as putting the devil back into hell. And this is a very bawdy story. And as is well known, the Decameron is one of the major sources of the works of Shakespeare. Several plays are based on it, in whole or in part. And so we can be sure that the author of the works of Shakespeare read that book and read it in Italian, because it hadn't been translated fully into English yet. The Alabec and Rustico story specifically appears to be referenced in Sonnet 144 and also in some of the plays. There's references to hell that seem to refer to a woman and seem to be a reference to the way the word is used in this story. So discovering that Henry Neville was interested in Alabec and Rustico is very interesting. It shows, first of all, that he was reading the Decameron. We know he probably owned 2 copies of it because there are 2 copies listed in the Billingbird book list, and one of them is at Audley End. But this is very strong evidence that he actually read at least part of the book, and what he decided to hone in on and write on a piece of paper over and over again. So that's a very interesting thing to know about Henry Neville. Looking at the handwriting itself, obviously this shows that Henry Neville had excellent handwriting, that he was able to vary his handwriting a great deal, as I will show you, and that he was interested in making his handwriting look beautiful and like a presentation, or even like a form of calligraphy. So you can see here the Alabec, the A here, the sort of ornamental flourish here, and then even more on this one. And one of the most interesting things is how Neville varies the handwriting. So this R, you see this loop here is different from this R, and this R descends down while this one doesn't. And then the rest of these R's are completely different. So this R and this R and this R and this R, they're all different. So he's consciously and purposely varying how he writes this letter. And the same thing with this ST ligature. This is very different from this. And this is yet slightly different. So he's varying this as he writes this. And look at this and over here, and this big flourish, fine line flourish at the end here. And then he writes this word and in a completely different style down here. So you can see how he's varying his handwriting. He's playing with handwriting. He's experimenting with different styles. And this is something that I've seen in other scribbles and pen trials from him. And as I'll show later, it also relates to the similar to the Northumberland manuscript cover, which has a similar tendency. Now, this rustico, rusticuccio is a normal formation in Italian. It's a diminutive suffix, cuccio, so it means like little or small. It can be affectionate or it can be derisive depending on the context. There was a cardinal rusticuccio at the time, so it's possible this rusticuccio is a reference to him. As is well known, the Shakespeare play Taming of the Shrew has a character Petruchio, one of the most famous characters in the works of Shakespeare, and that is formed a normal formation from the name Peter, Pietro, so Petruchio, just like you have rustico here, and then you have rusticuccio. At the bottom of the document, the name Killigrew is written several times, and then he writes Sir Harry Killigrew. Now, the formal name was Henry Killigrew, so since it was his father-in-law, maybe he referred to him as Harry Killigrew. The handwriting doesn't seem to differ that much here. The K here has a loop, and this one is slightly different, and the loop is down here. These all have closed loops. This is open, but there isn't as much variation in how Killigrew is written. He just seems to be writing it over and over again without varying it too much. Unlike this rustico, the R is where he really did vary it a great deal. So this is what I wanted to show you from this document. It proves that Henry Neville in 1591 not only knew about the Decameron, but knew a specific story in the book, that he was interested in that story enough to write the name out several times. It proves that he played with handwriting. It proves on top of it that he wrote people's names over and over, which is something that we see on the Northumberland manuscript cover. So I'm going to show you that next, but hold on for that. Now that we've looked at the Alabec and Rustico document, I thought we should take a look at the cover of the Northumberland manuscript to see how it's similar in some ways. Now, I'm not going to give a full discussion of the Northumberland manuscript here, but I want to just show you some similarities to put things into context. So, as is well known, on the cover of the Northumberland manuscript, the name William Shakespeare is written over and over again. And this is the earliest example known of the name William Shakespeare being written out in somebody's handwriting. If you look here on the document, it says Richard the Second and Richard the Third. So it's believed that copies of these plays were included in the Northumberland manuscript, but currently they are not part of the document. Above that, we have William Shakespeare is written very clearly. And so that might be telling us that William Shakespeare wrote these two plays. But further on down, his name is just written randomly. So we have William Shakespeare is written very clearly here. Shakespeare is written here. William Shakespeare is written clearly. William Shakespeare. William Shakes, part of the word. Here's Shakespeare again. And Will is written down here. So somebody is writing this name over and over again. And as we saw with the Alabic and Rustico, Henry Neville was writing people's names over and over again there too. Now, the handwriting is different because this is all in secretary hand, and Alabic and Rustico scribbles are in italic handwriting. So the handwriting itself does not match, but there's a lot of variation here on the Northumberland manuscript. I mean, if you look at this H and this H and this H, they're all different, and this S and this S and this S and this S, they're all different. So just like we saw with the Alabic and Rustico document, where the Henry Neville is varying how he writes the letters, this Northumberland manuscript has the exact same thing. Somebody is varying how they write the letters quite dramatically. I mean, these are not even similar in many ways. How, especially this capital S here and the H and the rest of the way it's written. So this is a very interesting connection. There are other names written on the Northumberland manuscript. Francis Bacon's name is written many times in whole and in part. And the name Thomas is written quite a few times also, which is something that people don't really talk about much, but is quite interesting. So it's an interesting connection between the two documents. It doesn't necessarily mean that the same person wrote both, but it is a similarity in habit that is quite obvious. So anyway, that's the wrap up for the Alabic and Rustico document. I will give you more details on the Northumberland manuscript later, as going into detail on what's written and where, and some comparisons with different handwriting, so we can try to get a handle on who may have done this writing as well. Thank you very much for coming by, and come back for more videos. Click like and subscribe and tell your friends. Thank you.